All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. So, as you can see, we have Out of the Park Baseball version 19. So, the 19th year of release. And we are going to do a box opening. You can see I am still at the main screen. I have not actually gotten into the game yet. So, that is going to be coming up later on. Hey, Cowboy fan, how are you? Welcome to the stream today. So the big reason I'm doing this is, one, I did get a free copy of the game. Full disclosure to you guys. I've been a Out of the Park customer since version 3, so that's been 16 years. Long time. And I was talking to one of my subscribers, Tom T, the other day, in fact, and he's from England. And I was trying to make the comparison between Out of the Park and Football Manager, and he says, I don't know anything about baseball. And I said, I thought baseball was a worldwide sport, but I got to thinking about it, and I'm doing okay, Cowboy fan. Ask any questions that you have. That's what today's stream is about. I'm just kind of giving some background here. And so I said, maybe if doing not only the opening the game and getting to know the game, but because most of what I do is Football Manager related, maybe I've got some of my Football Manager guys that don't know a lot about baseball, but love Football Manager. And I wanted to kind of compare, because the reason why Football Manager is arguably the greatest game in the world. Very in-depth, very detailed, lots of things you can do with the game. And Out of the Park is, to me, the same exact thing for its sport. It is the standard of which any baseball game out there is should be measured against. And much like Football Manager, it has a lot of detail, a lot of information. So I'm hoping that this kind of maybe opens the door to a new game for my Football Manager guys to maybe enjoy, but that'll come later. So with that, let's get into, I'm going to open up Out of the Park 18 here. And I am also going to open up Football Manager 18 right here. And I'll start with Football Manager because, again, most of my videos are Football Manager related. So this is your home screen as a manager. You've got your standings table, your table that we call it in football. You've got your top performers, player stat wise. And if we do an exact comparison to this screen, it's basically this screen. So in the upper left, we have what we call in baseball the standings table. So a lot of similarities. Also, you may not be aware, I think it was around OOTP 14 or 15 that Out of the Park and SI, the designer for Football Manager, actually combined resources in Out of the Park. And the goal there was for Marcus, who's the designer for OOTP, to kind of expand what they were able to do in the game and actually be able to bring in some of the ideas from Football Manager. It was a short-lived project. They only did it for one release. Not the greatest reviews, to be fair, from the Out of the Park community, but I think some of the things that Marcus learned in that partnership for that time did stick around and have made it into the game. So in looking at baseball, you do have a lot of the same screens, a lot of similarities, but I think where you might start seeing some variances that will actually make the game easier to play is in the tactics screen. So I started playing Football Manager around Football Manager 12, I think, was the first version I bought. I think I bought 12, 14, 15, 17, 18, and then I'll buy 19 as well, because it took that long for me to really get acclimated to the game. And I think if you look at the Football Manager forums, one of the biggest complaints is the difficulty of this screen here. And they did try to tweak it a little bit with the little color squares in 18, and it does help to a certain extent, but still knowing your shape, your roles, your duties. For a person that doesn't know how those things fit in the real game of football is very difficult. OOTP should have a demo, Cowboy fan, and I'm not going to do any playing today. It's really just the comparison, but I probably will do some playing. And I also already have from the last version, OOTP 18, on my YouTube channel. I do have some Let's Play games on there. So, if you want to check that out, you can just do a YouTube search. Actually, I can type it out here. Let's see. There you go. I guess no space between the numbers, but that's my YouTube channel. And I do have some Let's Plays of OOTP 18 on there to check that out. I will do it with 19, but this was to really try to get some people to kind of see the similarities in the game and then hopefully want to give it a try. So if we get into the tactics, you basically decide your shape, and you can play a 4-4-2. And if we just go through mine here, I mean, you've got a 4-3-3. I've got a 4-4-2 with volantes. I've got a 4-4-2 with a volante and an anchor. You can play 4-4-1-1. You can play a 3-5-2. The possibilities and combinations are endless. And I think that's what makes this part of Football Manager so difficult, is the various shapes, figuring out which is the best for your team. Now, let's compare that to Out of the Park. If we go into the screens here, down at the right, you have your pitching staff and your lineups. So let's go to the lineups, and then we're going to look at the graphical depth chart, because that's kind of the same thing that we've been dealing with. So much like Football Manager, you have a list of your players over here to the left, and you've got your shape, if you want to call it that, on the right. Now, in baseball, there's not a lot of variances. In fact, there's basically no variances. Since the game of baseball was created, you play with 9 players. You have a catcher that receives the ball from the pitcher. You have 4 infielders. We call this around the horn. You have first base, second base, shortstop, and third base. And then you have 3 outfielders, left field, center field, and right field. Now, unlike Football Manager, when you're doing tactics there, where you're trying to balance offense and defense, in your shape for baseball, it's only defense. This is only defense. So you have, it's completely stagnant. It's locked in. You don't have to guess anything. And so it is what it is. And so you can't, I can't move these around. I can't change, I can't change these to another position. So the shape, the roles, the duties, they're locked in and they don't change. So that makes it a lot easier, especially if you're someone that doesn't know the game of baseball. So the basic premise, rule-wise, in football, of course, is to keep the other team from scoring and to put the ball in the net and score goals for your side. Same concept. You want to score runs when you're at bat on offense, and when you're on defense, when you're out in the field, you want to stop the other teams from scoring. So when you look at, let's say I'm going to pull up Hal McRae as an example. So very similar to what you might see on a Football Manager card, just a lot simplified. You don't have, all of the different categories. And for those of you that are not sure what I'm talking about, let's just look at all the different skills, technical, mental, physical, and all we know is their current rating, right? We don't know what they might max out at one day. I mean, this guy looks good, but can he develop more? But, this dribbling, what is he going to max out at that? Is he going to be a 20? Is he going to be a 14? I don't know. I've got to kind of wait and see how he develops. Well, in Out of the Park, it's a lot easier. We only have 5 skills for an offensive player, and then you have just a few skills for the defensive side of the ball. So it makes it much easier to kind of analyze. Now, this also gives you his current rating of a 7, and his potential is an 8. And this is on a 10-point scale. So if he develops to his maximum potential, he will have an 8 out of 10 in contact. So from that perspective, to me, it's much easier to kind of come in and analyze players and determine what they're going to be in the future. However, much like Football Manager, you notice this player is 33 years old. Once you hit a certain point, your ratings will actually start to decrease. So he may have an 8 potential, but at 33, this 7 may be a sign that he's starting to go down. If you're actually playing the game, you'll know if he's gone down or not. But we can also look at his development tag, and I can see where he's dropped, where he's improved. So in 77, he actually dropped from an 8 to a 7. So, you can track things that way. There's also injury history to see if a player is injury prone, just like in Football Manager. But let's get into the nuts and the bolts of the actual game. So this is, comparing, going back to the tactics. That's kind of what I'm kind of covering here. It's very simple. There's 9 positions in the field. And that's it, compared to 11. But you don't have roles and duties that you've got to keep in mind, that you've got to remember. And those of you that are in the chat now, if you've got questions, ask away, especially if there's things about baseball that you don't understand. And whoever the other person is that came in, say hi so I know who you are and that you're here. You also have backup players. So that's what these U1 and U2, these are your backups, your depth chart, your subs, so to speak. So in baseball, you get 3 subs in a match, right? In baseball, you're only limited by the number of players on your side, but you don't usually play with subs for the most part. You have pinch hitters. These are players that can pinch hit for the pitcher, who is typically not a good offensive player, later in games. So like when you're going to pull a pitcher out and put a new pitcher in, then you might use a pinch hitter to hit for that pitcher, and then you've got that allows you to replace him without having to make him bat. And that's where the mental side of the game comes in. You do have to learn switches, double switches, and that's just stuff that comes with time, but it's not going to make or break you being able to play the game. And that's the important thing. It doesn't have the learning curve that Football Manager has. You can basically come in and I can look at my depth, at my roster here, and I can look at my batting ratings, and I can go, okay, here's my 2 catchers. Well, this guy's a 6, this guy's a 4, he's a 7, a 5. So just obviously looking at this guy, these 2 catchers plus the star ratings, Rick Dempsey's the better player between those 2, right? I mean, that should be obvious. So when I go to my depth chart, that's why Rick Dempsey is my starter and Gustafson is my backup player. And this is where you can kind of tweak it. I have him set up to play every 5th game, but you have a lot of options in here. You can have every 20th game, only if Rick Dempsey gets tired. So there's ways that you can tweak that. But again, even with those tweaks, it's nowhere near as difficult to me as Football Manager is trying to figure out who the better player is, who I should start over another player, things of that nature. So that's kind of the point that I'm going at. In fact, using this as an example, Liz Musette, okay, I signed him. Take a look at his history. 20 goals in 31, 19 goals in 27, 12 in 27 last year. AR was better, but didn't score quite as much, had a lot more assists, okay? So kind of a wash for me. But this year it says he's not even worth starting at all. And I'm like, wow, he actually led the Premier in scoring the first year, and he's led my team 2 out of 3 years. So, and it says he's still a very good player, but, I can't get the game to start him. So, it's a little confusing to me sometimes in Football Manager to do that. Same thing with pitching. So this is your defense, and typical defensive philosophy, you want to have speed in the outfield. You want to have good glove ratings. So, we've got speed, outfield range, how much range in the outfield they can cover, how good their arm is to throw the ball back into the infield, how error prone they are. The higher this is, the better. The lower it is. This would be like if you and I were playing, tossing the ball back and forth, and I threw the ball to you. Let's say you're standing at 12 o'clock. I'm standing at 6 o'clock on the field. And I go to throw the ball to you, and it ends up going to 3 o'clock. Well, that would be maybe an error of a 1. Just no idea where the ball's going to go. So, you have to balance that, the range, the arm, the error, but then also their abilities in each position. So he's better in left field. He's above average in right field, below average in center field, but he can still play there. So this is, balancing his defensive abilities with his offensive abilities here, and then, putting together the right group of guys that can play solid defense to stop the other team from scoring points or runs, and also contribute on the offensive side, hitting the ball and scoring runs. And that's difficult. And then you couple that with the fact that there's a salary cap, so it's not like in Football Manager where a Man City can just throw $1 billion out there and, no problem. You're on the same level playing field with everybody else, every other team, and you've got to put together the best team you can for that price.